Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. About a month ago, we laid out our public safety plan and committed to keeping Vermonters updated along the way as those ideas made their way through the State House. Our public safety bill hasn't been introduced yet, but we expect it will be in the next day or so. But so far, the House and Senate committees on jurisdiction, meaning judiciary, have started to consider parts of the bill based on the language we've drafted. We realize each of our bills this session in housing, education, affordability, and public safety have a long way to go as they make their way through the legislative process. But I want to emphasize how important it is for us to make changes in all these areas this session, because they're critical to solving so many of the challenges we face. Even with all the disruption coming out of Washington, we have to do our part and focus on Vermont's priorities, because that's what the voters in November told us are important to them. One of the issues that came through loud and clear was a renewed focus on public safety, to make our communities safer and hold those who continue to commit crimes and disrupt our quality of life accountable, which is why our proposals reflect on those principles. We need to create a culture of accountability and end the policies we've seen where people with dozens of offenses are once again released on conditions and then reoffend, sometimes on the very same day. Commissioner Morrison will talk more about this in a minute. We also need to recognize the connection that drug addiction is playing, along with the trafficking that results in the increase of crime in our communities. So we'll continue to build the path to recovery, creating more options to those who want help to get the support they need. In my budget, I included $1.5 million for the Agency of Human Services to repurpose existing beds in correctional facilities so law enforcement can get people into treatment at the point of intervention. My budget also includes funding for MAT, medication-assisted treatment, in our correction system so people can get the help they need to turn their lives around and set themselves up for long-term success after they leave state custody. Secretary Samuelson will go into more detail, but it's crucial that public safety and human services continue to work together to solve the challenges we face. By working to reduce the number of addicted Vermonters, we can help those in need get back on their feet and on a path towards a lifetime of recovery, which results in safer and healthier communities. With that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Morrison.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety, and I could talk all day about the intersection of public health and public safety. In fact, I won't talk all day. I only have brief remarks, but this is not new. Working together, public safety officials working with our public health officials, working with our community-based service providers is not new. We just need to be shining a bigger spotlight on it right now. I want to share with you a little bit of the why behind the omnibus bill on public safety, and then I'm going to just quickly tick through the 10 main points of the omnibus bill before I turn things over to Secretary Samuelson. My team and I travel across the state. We listen in on public safety fora that occur around the state. We talk to police chiefs, we talk to EMS providers, we talk to town officials, and across the state, we talk to everyday citizens too. Vermonters are telling us that they have had enough of several things, and the four that I'm gonna highlight for you are they're sick of profiteers who come to Vermont to sell drugs and engage in violent crime. And relatedly, the Vermonters are tired of the uptick in gun violence and homicide rates. They're tired of the lack of accountability for people who commit serious crimes or persistently commit lower level crimes with apparent impunity. They're fed up with a system that appears to focus too much on individuals and ignores behaviors that harm communities. And they no longer feel safe in their communities. Sometimes it's the downtowns or a park or a recreation path, but people are tired of feeling unsafe in their own community. When I reflect on what we hear across the state, I think about a pendulum that has swung too far and needs to be rebalanced. I think about things like social cohesion and what we used to call the social contract. That contract, a commitment to the common good, has been severely damaged. To draw a word picture, the fabric that binds society and communities together is torn, and it is in need of immediate repair. Repairing that fabric is going to take work. As we work to repair it, we need to recognize the intersection of public health and public safety. Healthy people mean stronger families and schools. Safer communities mean more opportunities for social connection and places where people and visitors want to frequent, which allows our businesses to thrive. The interconnectedness, those fibers of the fabric, go on and on. My metaphor could go on and on, but you get the point. When we talk about the public safety omnibus bill, you won't hear me say, we got to be tough on crime. This is not a return to old school tactics. But we know that we cannot enforce our way out of the current situation. Last session, we worked very closely with members of the Vermont legislature, last session and in fact in the last biennium, to make progress on some of the most persistent issues. We hope to build on that partnership and continue to move the pendulum back toward the middle so we can provide the right tools to address a broad spectrum of behaviors. I wrote behaviors in caps and bold because we're focusing on behaviors. So we need to be able to address a broad spectrum of behaviors that are harming our communities, contributing to the atrophy of our downtowns, and creating chaos in public places. We know that a small number of individuals are having an outsized negative impact on communities. We need tools to address those whose behaviors are not curtailed by the usual processes. Regardless of the underlying cause of the behaviors, we need interventions that are certain, swift, and proportionate to protect the community from ongoing harm. I'll give an overview of the proposed interventions that are found in the Public Safety Omnibus Bill, and then Secretary Samuelson will discuss other initiatives that the state is undertaking. The 10 components of the Public Safety Omnibus Bill of 2025 include repealing Raise the Age for 19-year-olds. This has already been taken up separately by House Judiciary. Changes to the Youthful Offender Statute, in essence, allowing youthful offender protections for those who want to engage with rehabilitation or services, while providing sufficient rigor and accountability for those who refuse to engage with rehabilitation or services. The third component is to address repeat offenders. We propose bail revocation reform, which is a slight restructuring to make bail revocation a more useful tool for the courts. Fourth, universal sealing of criminal records, not expungements. Fifth, limit discretion of the court to suspend or reduce sentences of repeat violent offenders. Six, working on a waiver of extradition technical changes. This is a little bit of a technical area, but it's intended to streamline the process by which people who are wanted on out-of-state warrants are returned to their home state. It's currently a slow and cumbersome process, and frequently those people are let go back into the Vermont community while they are awaiting this process to play out, which makes no sense. To redefine recidivism, this is to be able to measure what is working and what is not, and also to be able to identify the what or the when desistance occurs, when a person stops behaving in this criminal manner. Number 8 is expanding pretrial supervision by the Department of Corrections. This is to expand the pilot project that was started last year. It is currently only in Orleans County, and we propose to expand it to 1 or 2 more counties. Number 9 is to expand the suite of tools to connect people to the right level of care in a timely manner and provide step-down care. This is to combine increased accountability mentioned above with expanded options for care. And lastly, the last piece is somewhat separate, but it is to repeal the sunset of the incapacitation or detox provision, which would propose to do away with the ability to hold non-compliant incapacitated persons at correctional facilities as of July 1st. So those are essentially the wave tops of the 10 issues inside the omnibus bill. And with that, I'll turn things over to Secretary Samuelson. After she is done, we will be available for questions, and I'm joined by one of my colleagues also for some, if you have technical questions related to this.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jenny Samuelson, and it's my privilege to be the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services. While we know that the majority of individuals struggling with mental health and substance use challenges don't engage in behaviors that disrupt their communities, we cannot overlook the impact of a smaller group of individuals, those grappling particularly with substance use, whose behaviors are affecting communities in an outsized way across Vermont. By strengthening our mental health and substance use systems here in Vermont, we are taking crucial steps towards fostering healthier individuals and building safer, more resilient communities. Over the past 3 years, we've made notable strides in expanding the mental health services across the state. We've introduced a variety of new resources to help those who in need get the services they need most when they need it. These include 988, the helpline, which provides someone to call when you need support when you're in a crisis. The second is the mobile crisis teams, who can go to someone who is in crisis when they're in need. We've also added mental health urgent cares, which offer an alternative to emergency departments for urgent mental health needs, and clinicians embedded within law enforcement agencies, including with the state police and several local law enforcement agencies, ensuring swift access to care when necessary. Last year, we enhanced involuntary mental health treatment, which ensures that individuals get the help they need, and even if they cannot seek it themselves. These efforts are already making a meaningful impact on the lives of many Vermonters and improving our communities. But as we've heard in communities across the state, we must acknowledge that there continue to be gaps in our system that will remain, particularly for those who have substance use disorder and/or in our recovery treatment system of care. One of the key gaps which we've identified is the challenge many individuals face in accessing treatment when they need it at the moment that they are ready to take advantage of treatment. Additionally, we need to improve the continuity of care and reduce unnecessary transitions within the system. The first step towards these improvements is to reinvigorate the public inebriate programs, which Commissioner previously mentioned, which allows individuals who are dangerously intoxicated to have a safe place to be until they're sober and are able to connect with services. In many communities, these programs were underutilized and closed, leaving communities few places to turn in a crisis and law enforcement without any appropriate options for care. We're going to work on rebuilding the public inebriate beds, merging them with the mental health crisis beds, which will ensure that they can provide co-occurring mental health and substance use treatment, and we believe will overall strengthen the program. At the same time, the provisions that allow us to transport individuals who are inebriated and pose harm to themselves and to others to correctional facilities until they are sober without being charged for a crime is sunsetting. We need to ensure that this resource remains available, as a lack of beds to help people in crisis poses a significant gap. So we're going to work with the legislature to repeal the sunset of that provision for those who need more support than a public inebriate program or a hospital can offer. Next, the residential treatment system needs to support people at all stages of their recovery, whether they are entering for the first time or returning to residential treatment or transitioning to the next step in their recovery. To ensure that individuals receive comprehensive care they need in our residential treatment settings, we are expanding the options for treatment within our current residential treatment programs so that individuals can get the support they need to enter the programs when they need it and stay there through the full course of their treatment. While Vermont has been a leader in medication for opioid use disorder in our correctional facilities, we must acknowledge that individuals who are incarcerated often do not receive a residential level of substance use treatment. While medication is an essential tool in stabilizing individuals, it does not address the root causes of substance use or provide the necessary skills for recovery. We know that as many as 70% of incarcerated individuals are enrolled in medication for opioid use disorder treatment. Thus, we propose using one of the correctional facilities to provide comprehensive residential treatment. Our goal should always be to support people as they transition back into communities. This is why we've reinvigorated the pretrial supervision, while we've integrated the pretrial supervision program with treatment programs, which will ensure that individuals involved in the judicial system follow their conditions of release and prevent additional crimes from being committed. Why wait for recidivism to occur when we can intervene earlier, when we see someone is struggling with their recovery, and provide continuity and accountability and support for those who are in need? For many of those transitioning back into their communities from treatment programs, whether that's incarceration or from our residential treatment program, there are significant barriers to sustaining recovery. Housing instability, coupled with an environment where substance use is the norm, can undermine their efforts. Some individuals may even find themselves returning to a household where drug trafficking is prevalent or where they are being trafficked themselves. This is where recovery housing becomes, where we pair services and housing together, becomes absolutely vital. Vermont has been expanding its network of recovery housing, which provides individuals with a supportive, substance-free environment to help them maintain their recovery. This year, we are focusing on pairing recovery housing with intensive outpatient programs and access to comprehensive services, like job training and life skills, to reduce the barriers to treatment and help individuals stay on track as they transition into a healthier life. We are also incorporating navigators in our residential treatment programs to support the successful transitions. Furthermore, we recognize that substance use has evolved beyond the opioids that we've seen for the last decade. While medication like Suboxone and Methadone have been effective for opioid addiction, they are not effective for stimulant use. In response, we are adapting our programs to include new evidence-based practices like contingency management, a proven approach that builds internal motivation through the use of incentives. This initiative is already being rolled out across the state. Our ultimate goal is to fill the gaps we've identified in our system of care, making the services we offer more accessible and effective for everyone who needs them. This in turn will provide critical tools and accountability for supporting those individuals whose behaviors may be disrupting our communities and impacting the broader public safety. As Commissioner Morrison said, healthy people make healthy and safe communities. I'll turn it back over to the governor.
Thank you, Secretary. I'll now open it up to questions.
I didn't understand any of that stuff about contingency management. What is that?
So contingency management is a program that uses incentives, like financial incentives, for people who are in recovery to assist them in continuing and remaining in recovery. What the evidence has proven is it helps build the efficacy of someone's commitment to their recovery.
So if someone stays sober, they get...
Someone stays sober, they get an incentive, and then that can include money.
Thank you.
Governor, what do you make of the argument from some that would say expanding pretrial detention, whether that be, at a correctional facility to detox or just writ large, some of the bail reform proposals that you're putting forward could be maybe unconstitutional or have constitutional questions about, whether they've been charged yet or found guilty, excuse me?
I don't know. I'm not sure that the Constitution question really has much merit, but I'll leave that to the scholars to figure out. We just want to make sure that people are held accountable for their actions, and if they're charged with something and they have a good reason to believe that they committed these crimes, that they be held accountable. And I think that's what Vermonters are demanding. They don't feel safe in their homes. They don't feel safe on the streets. They don't feel safe anywhere, and they just want to get back to a place where they can enjoy life in Vermont. And we've lost some of that over the last few years.
Some say that we already have the accountability measures in state law, but it's that access to the justice, getting their day in court, referring to the court backlog, that's actually the real deterrent here, in saying that we need more time to let last year's expansion of the judiciary play out. What do you make of that argument?
Well, again, I think Vermonters are demanding action now. We see too many people who have multiple offenses and have conditions that they've been released on that reoffend some of the same and doing some of the same things that they were arrested previously. And that doesn't appear to have much accountability. And I believe that we have to take action against that. If they violate the conditions of release, then they should be put in a place until they get to court. But that's just my opinion.
Do you want us to speak to the bail issue? Sure. I'm going to frame up just a little bit of the response to your question about bail, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tucker Jones, Associate General Counsel for the Department of Public Safety. So I'm going to reveal my age and shock you all, but 35 years ago, I began my career in law enforcement, and somewhere about 25 years ago, there was a shift all of a sudden in what how bail was used. For the first 25 years of my career, protecting the public and victims of crime was considered as part of the analysis of whether or not somebody should be released on bail. So actually considering the likelihood of the person to harm others in the community was part of that analysis. And it appeared to work well. I'm sure there are differing opinions on that. Somewhere around 10 years ago, and I must have been asleep at the switch when it happened, there was this claim that our Constitution only allows bail to be imposed to ensure a defendant appears in court. And I don't know if that has been rigorously put to the scholars to determine if that is true or not. But I can tell you who's left behind in that equation are crime victims and the community. And that's what I was talking about with the fabric of this community being pulled apart because they no longer have anyone representing their interest in making a decision about whether or not a person can comport themselves to the social contract while they await their day in court. So I'm going to let Tucker say things much more legalese and elegantly, but that's my experience having worked in the system for a long time. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tucker Jones with the Department of Public Safety. This topic is currently with the judiciary committees. Specifically, bail revocation had kind of an introduction in Senate Judiciary Committee. And those committee members and the stakeholders are well aware of the contours of constitutional restrictions as it relates to the imposition, the revocation, and the withholding of bail. So that everyone knows the framework going into it. The question is whether there can be greater clarity from a legislative perspective within those existing contours. Regarding the circumstances, specifically when we're dealing with people who continue to violate conditions of release and continue to commit crimes while on conditions of release and are simply not amenable, for whatever reason, to abide by those conditions. Last time we discussed this at the press conference was January 15th. Since that time, just this past week, some individual with close to 2,000 law enforcement encounters was arrested again for some serious conduct. Likewise, someone last week was arrested with 100 law enforcement encounters for some serious conduct. We need to have a system that is responsive to those individuals and takes into account the reality when they are unable to voluntarily abide by conditions of release and be responsive to that.
I remember hearing in the State House last biennium from judiciary, from state's attorneys, that what they really needed to address a lot of these issues we're talking about was more positions. It was more money to hire more judges, more judicial assistants, kind of everyone up and down the ladder. My sense from what I've heard about this omnibus proposal from the FY26 budget proposal too is that there's not money in there to hire new positions for the judiciary, for state's attorneys. Correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but if that is the case, why do you not see that as part of the solution here?
Well, again, I think we've, in the past, have been able to accommodate for the rule of law without all of the positions that are needed, or supposedly needed. And we have funded a number of those positions over the last few years. I think there are some we've included even in this year's budget. But again, I think we have to look back at what we've done that has created the situation we find ourselves in. And I don't believe it's all about the judicial backlog. I believe that it's about accountability and people taking advantage of our good nature and not being held accountable under certain conditions. It seems like a reasonable request if you've been charged with a crime and you've been given conditions upon release. And as long as you abide by those conditions, you can stay out of the corrections system, and they violate that. And that doesn't seem like that contract is working very well, especially when they do it multiple times. So I just think that we need to, if we hold people more accountable, that we'll have better results, that people will know that we mean what we say, and that they adhere to the conditions that we've asked them to accommodate us with. So again, I think that there are many things we can do without increasing the number of positions. We have an affordability crisis at this point in time, and I think that we have to do everything we can to work together to make sure that we get through this without just automatically just going to spending more money. Anybody else?
Has anyone had any conversations with local officials about whether they're on board with this idea? Because local police departments would need to take a different posture relative to people offending that they're currently not taking. And so can we speak maybe a little bit to that issue? Or?
Can you tell me more what makes you think it's law enforcement that's not taking action?
Well, I guess I need a little bit of an understanding of what would happen on the ground now for someone who is intoxicated, who is offended multiple times, who is out on the street, and who is not presently being arrested by law enforcement for their intoxication. And I just need to
So, intoxication is not a crime in Vermont, and the issue of incapacitation, which is not at all related to an arrest. It is a civil status. It is a protective custody so that the person does not harm themselves or die in a snowbank or something like that, okay? So the incapacitation statute that we're referring to about being able to take people non-compliant in-caps to a correctional facility is a civil status, and it is strictly a protective status. It is not to be conflated with people whose behavior meets the element of a crime. I thought where you were going was when we're talking about people who are continually violating their conditions of release, that law enforcement perhaps is not taking action. Law enforcement always has to respond. There's no option about whether or not to respond when the community calls for help. There are decision points along the way about what they will take action on, but those are driven by what the prosecutor is willing to prosecute and what direction or memos they provide to the agencies. So it is very rare in my experience that law enforcement does not hold the person accountable by starting a case again with the person, and they take direction from either Rule 3 or from their local prosecutor, depending on the situation, about whether or not they cut a citation to the person, which means an invitation to appear in court, and they go on their way, or they take that person into physical custody, bring them back to the station, do up the paperwork, and take them in front of a judge or to corrections until they can see a judge. So those are decisions that play out that the police have some discretion in, but they are largely driven by the direction they receive from the prosecutor's office.
I guess I was just trying to understand whether law enforcement officials on the ground, in the field, when they encounter a person who is intoxicated, but maybe not committing any other crimes, whether this bill and the changes you're proposing change the way those law enforcement officers are now supposed to interact with that person.
It changes nothing because the law is currently in place, and the sunset that is due to go into effect on July 1st only relates to where a law enforcement officer can take the person. So back in the day, as I was explaining, we took them to a place in Burlington called Act One, and if they were able to comport themselves to the rules there, you can't smoke, you have to stay in your room and sleep it off, right? Then you could stay there as an incapacitated person in a protective custody. But if you were fighting or slamming your head off the back of the cruiser window or refusing to follow rules, then you had to go to the Department of Corrections because that's the only safe place that exists until the person sobers up and can be released with no criminal charge unless they separately did something. So the law around handling incapacitated persons is not changing. The only thing that's due to change is that as of July 1st, if we make no statutory adjustments, it will take correctional facilities off the table as a safe placement for people. And that is not a good thing because we currently do not have, as Secretary Samuelson said, we don't have what we used to have 35 years ago for these community-based beds where people could sleep it off under supervision. So, you're welcome.
Governor, Senator Phil Baruth this week essentially called the school choice proposal from your administration a non-starter. The Vermont School Boards Association as well said it would politicize school boards, increase costs, increase inequities. What do you say to those concerns?
Well, we're looking to accommodate the independent schools that are important to Vermont. We're not looking to expand them. We're not providing vouchers. And I think there's a lot of folks who are just misinterpreting what we're saying or mischaracterizing. So take for instance, we have school choice now, school choice in Franklin County, for instance. But it's not unlimited, like some people say. It's limited by the number of open classrooms they may have throughout Franklin County. So they can go anywhere they want within reason if there are classrooms available for them. So we're just trying to accommodate the independent schools, again, that are important to us, not expanding them. In fact, there's a moratorium against that. So we have to separate school choice with independent schools, and I think they've conflated them as well.
Governor, I want to clarify, did Commissioner Morrison say 70% of inmates now are receiving recovery meds? Did I hear that right?
And I believe Commissioner Demel is on, but yes, approximately 70% of our inmates who are currently in our correctional facilities or incarcerated individuals are receiving medication-assisted therapy.
Medication for drug
Substance use,
recovery?
yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
And that's why we believe it's really important for us to be able to, and why we have the capacity to take on an entire facility that can do residential treatment. I do want, Governor, if I could circle back to the previous question. Sure. One of the things is when you asked what's happening, right now individuals, we have the option to take them to a public inebriate program where they still exist. Many times they end up at the hospital. And our last resort is for them to go to a correctional facility. It's only when their behavior puts themselves or the staff in those other places at risk. So I just want to make sure that's really clear. It doesn't, as Commissioner Morrison said, it doesn't change the law. What it's changing are the options, and that protects the individuals and it protects the staff who are staffing those locations like our hospitals. We don't need folks to be in the emergency room.
And did I hear you say that you were going to be expanding the number of beds that are available for that type of treatment?
Right, so our public inebriate programs, what happened is they were seeing little use. And so as staffing became more challenging, many of them began to close. Our goal is to, right now we have mental health crisis beds across the state. Our goal is to merge those two things because we know that many of the individuals who are being served have both co-occurring mental health and substance use, which also allows us to strengthen both programs by using the same staff who have the appropriate skills so that we are creating efficiency in our systems.
All right, we're going to switch over to the phones now. Ed Barber, Newport Daily Express.
Yeah, good afternoon, Governor. My question is probably better answered by Commissioner Morrison. The question is, you made a comment about expanding the pretrial supervision program that is being tested in Orleans County. I was wondering if you could outline what that pretrial supervision program looks like and how it differs from current practice.
So again, if Commissioner Demmel's on, he can add on to this response. Right now, if someone has been released from by the court system into the community while they're waiting for trial, there isn't supervision. And what we know from looking at the federal pretrial supervision program is that being able to, for many of the folks who are having issues with recidivism, having them paired with what looks like almost probation and parole, where someone is working with them around their conditions of release. Sometimes those include substance use treatment. They may include where they're housed. It really depends on what the judge has set for those pretrial requirements. There is someone then to supervise them. Again, I think the closest synonym I can create for folks in terms of their imagination is gives someone like a parole officer to help them stay in compliance. I don't know if Commissioner Demmel's on and wants to add anything.
All right, Keith Whitcomb, Rutland Herald.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Tim, Vermont Business Magazine.
Hi, Governor. Following up on Calvin's question about the schools, I think one of the non-starter parts is this line from Secretary Saunders' proposal from last week is the ability for a student to attend will be based on the outcome of a lottery of all interested students, which is not the model of the public school system now in which you have to take all comers. If that part is, politics is all about compromise. But if they're not willing to compromise, the legislature, then will any of this go forward?
Well, let's answer the question first, because I think, again, I don't know what you had said is quite accurate, but Secretary Saunders.
We currently have school choice in our system, and we currently have public schools that operate a lottery for those students to attend a public school. What we're hearing in terms of criticism and questions are really pointing to some of the challenges and inequities that we have in our current system. The governor's plan is designed to address those issues so that we can build a strong public education system and allow for options, assuming that there is shared accountability, that those are high quality options for students. So in our current system, our current system does have a voucher program. Non-operating districts are able to send those dollars out of state or to another school. This proposal eliminates that and ensures that every student is assigned to a public school. We are proposing a very generous funding amount to ensure that those schools can offer a very wide range of educational programs and options for every student. And as we already have in our system, there are different options that students can choose. The difference in this plan is that we're putting more accountability around those options, and we're managing those options, in effect limiting that to ensure that the entire system is strong.
I think Secretary Saunders, the issue is that within a school district, within the school choice schools, if not every student will have the opportunity to go to that school, correct?
So within this framework, this school district is really in the driver's seat of identifying what is needed in terms of offerings in their school, in the school portfolio. So part of this is really evaluating what is our school portfolio, how are we able to best serve students, and where would it be advantageous to have a school choice option. That might be because in parts of our state, there has been a reliance on choice to be able to serve students' needs, and that also might mean that there's an interest for a specialized program and being able to develop that within the district. The understanding is that within our public schools, we are investing heavily in ensuring that they can meet a range of programming and offerings for every student. So when you think about and this is really focused on high schooler. So when you think about a high schooler's experience, they have an assigned public school that receives a very generous funding amount to provide an array of programming. They might also choose to attend a career and technical education center because that's of interest to them, or they might also choose to pursue a school choice school. So the idea here is to design options for students, but ensure that that is built upon a very strong public education system and that there is accountability to all options being high quality in the system.
Would, not to go too far down the road on this, Secretary, thank you, are there limiting factors, say, to special education students on some of these schools?
No, so schools would be required to provide the full range of services and be in compliance with that, and that is part of the plan. In fact, the reformed approach is providing additional resources and support at that central office level to ensure that schools benefit from these resources, from the additional compliance and monitoring to ensure high quality. So the entire system is designed in a way to ensure that those dollars are focused on what's in the best interest of students and that our teachers and principals get the resources that they need to provide specialized services to students.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Governor.
If I just want to expand just a little bit further on that, Tim, because you bring up a good point. You know, if we look beyond what we're trying to do today, beyond the rhetoric that we're hearing and all the naysayers about changing the education system as we know it, the two basic premises for doing this is to give our kids a better education, a more equitable education across the state, no matter where they live. So if we can do that, as well as at a cost, at a price that Vermonters can afford, if we get beyond that and we're able to follow through on this system and create this system that we believe is better than what we have today, we're not going to have to worry as much about school choice because every school will be giving a high quality education, maybe the best in the nation. And we won't have to worry about them wanting to go to a different school based on the quality of education. And that's what we're trying to do because not all schools are providing an equal education as we see it today. They don't have the programs that some schools do. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it different so that they don't have to leave. They can get a high quality education right in their own backyard.
All right, we'll go back to the room for any final questions.
Governor, this week, Don George is retiring from Blue Cross Blue Shield after about 16 years. In a letter to state lawmakers and to officials, cited pretty dire financial challenges brought by our demographics and declining cash on hand. I mean, does the administration have a contingency plan if Blue Cross Blue Shield, which insures about a third of Vermonters, if I'm not mistaken, goes under?
Well, our Department of Financial Regulation is on ongoing monitoring of the situation with Blue Cross Blue Shield to make sure that they have the resources so that doesn't happen. So I don't know if there's anyone on from DFR at this point, but we can go into that with more detail because we continue to monitor what they have for assets to make sure they have the liquidity to continue.
What ultimately would that mean? though? You know, if the state had to step in, or, I mean, what would that mean for Vermonters' healthcare? What just big picture, what do you see that?
I think, again, we're monitoring the situation. I think they're healthier than they once thought, but again, I don't want to deal with the what ifs until it actually happens.
There's a bill that was in Senate Judiciary yesterday and will be again tomorrow that has to deal with the state relationship with, say, ICE or immigration efforts, because right now it's up to the governor whether to join a relationship like this. Basically what this bill will do is you would give the suggestion and the legislature would vote on it, kind of stripping power from the executive branch. I was wondering if you're familiar with that bill or what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that. I don't know if it's got legs and will go any further than the committee that it's in right now, was just introduced. But, you know, I think it has a very clear constitutional issue that we would probably bring up. And so we'll see where it goes from here. But in 2017, we actually put in place something that would fix what I believe they're trying to repair. And we did this with bipartisan support. We all sat in this room and signed legislation to make it happen. So I don't see that that's workable, the bill that in its present form, and I don't see that it's necessary.
I have the same question, Governor, and it seems as though some lawmakers are concerned that given the rhetoric out of Washington about large-scale ICE raids and such, that it's likely you will get a request from the federal government to allow them to have Vermont law enforcement coordinate, cooperate, and actually do some of that coordination with ICE on the ground. I just want to know how you're feeling about, let's say that happens tomorrow. Let's say you get a request from ICE. Are you inclined to cooperate with that?
Again, we will adhere to our law as well as adhere to federal law. And I don't believe that's going to happen. We would assist, as I said, I think in a previous press conference, if someone has committed a crime, a violent crime of some sort, we would assist immigration in advocating for them to pick them up if they're here illegally and committed a violent crime. If they're here legally or illegally, but working and not causing any trouble to anyone, those aren't the folks we want to focus on. And what we need Congress to do is actually fix the broken immigration system that we have today. That's what they should be focusing on. And hopefully they will in the not too distant future once we get through all the bluster of the initial session.
So if ICE asks you to have local law enforcement assist with the arrest of non-violent immigrants, you would not agree to that?
We would adhere to what we signed in 2017.
Can you remind me of what the
Well, we'll get that to you. Okay.
Speaking of action coming out of DC, Elon Musk is trying to cut a lot of money with Doge. Have you thought about maybe a Vermont version of Doge, or something to take a fresh look at, gee, what can we cut in Vermont spending?
We actually did that when I first came into office. And we found some opportunity. We had a group of people who were from the outside looking at some of what we were doing that we could do better. And I thought that was pretty effective, and we probably should reinstitute something like that. The pandemic came along and kind of sidetracked us for a bit, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I think giving somebody the unfettered access to everything is a problem, but we didn't do it in that regard. We just had people from all walks of life, business people as well, that were there Vermonters that wanted to help. So we found a lot of opportunity, and then we actually fixed some issues along the way.
Think you might do that again?
I don't see why we wouldn't, but it hasn't been on the front burner right now. We're looking at other, the education plan, public safety, and affordability in general. So we have a lot on our plate right now, but it's not a bad idea to reinstitute that.
Governor, I know last month you set, earlier this month you set up an interagency task force in the administration to respond to some of these changes at the federal level. Can you provide any update on what that task force has done?
They're working on it. Obviously, we wanted to just be prepared, and after we instituted that policy, that group, they actually extended the date, so it wasn't as immediate. And I was thinking that even yesterday, I was thinking the 25%. That's all right.
That's something like that, yeah.
One more strike. Even at that point, I lost my train of thought. Thank you, Calvin. But even yesterday, I was thinking the 25% was going to come into play, and we were going to have to be prepared as to what that meant for Vermont today. But that's not going to be put into, that was signed, but it won't go into effect until sometime in March. So it's complicated as well, because it might not have an immediate impact on Vermont, but certainly over the long period of time will. And we have to look at the retaliatory, what Canada could do in response to that, and that could have a huge impact on us. So there's a lot in flux here, and I might ask Secretary Curley if she could maybe give us a little bit about an update as to where you are at this point.
Thanks, Governor. Yeah, the team's been meeting regularly, and we have been trying to, get our work in order, and we prioritized taking a look at energy initially because, honestly, the immediate impact to every single Vermonter would be on energy should this tariff come to bear. So we have modeling that we can use that would tell us how energy would impact the state's coffers as well as all of our budgets personally. So we don't have the results of that yet. The economists are scrubbing through that. But, somebody might say, okay, so we know that would impact us, so what? Then what? And so, as you mentioned, what we are planning to do with that is to then think about how we could potentially mitigate the impacts. And so there's short-term impacts, there's medium-term, there's long-term. And short-term, people might have to brace themselves, but the reality is, importantly, people really want stability and predictability. So we want to make sure that people have knowledge and understanding of what's coming down the pike. And so we're just trying to get out in front of that. There are other industries. We're able to tell what the top, top industries are, all the industries that we import and export. And so there's kind of this ripple effect that could happen. There's a lot to get your arms around, but we're working on that, all hands on deck with that. And we're really trying to, prioritize affordability, thinking about that as we go through this work. But there will be more to come. It's early yet, and obviously we got this little reprieve here, but there will be, as of right now, there is this threat of a steel and aluminum tariff that will come into play on March 12th, which is worldwide a 25% tariff there. So we're taking a look at that as well. But as you mentioned, we'll be trying to roll out some information as soon as we have something that's a little more concrete that we can share.
We're a little over a month away from crossover. I know there's rules exemptions and ways around things that can happen, but back to education, when do you expect to say have a bill number, have a full plan on paper to go through the committee process?
She's right there. Before crossing.
Yeah, I mean, we understand this is a significant piece of legislation, and I think the pro tem, the speaker, understand that as well. We're going to make every effort to put it on. I mean, we have it on the front burner now, but to strategize on how to best get it through the process and answer any questions that folks might have. But I think thus far it's received a lot of attention, a lot of cooperation with the legislature, And I feel good about the ability for us to continue to work together to make sure that it happens, because we need to have it, we need to put it in place. We need to get something passed this year. So we'll continue to march forward.
Looking where you're at now in the process, compared to say maybe where you thought you may be at this time, say before the legislative session started, how would you say the timeline has worked so far to your satisfaction?
Well, again, I think it's moving forward, and I think we have a lot of cooperation with the legislature, and I wasn't sure that we would have that level of cooperation from individuals as well as the entire body. So, again, I feel good about where we're at. We have a lot of questions to work our way through, but I feel good about it.
Status of the state prison? I've heard your administration wants to build in Essex or something?
A replacement of the women's correctional facility. There was some property that was identified in Essex. This has been a long-standing issue, probably, I think I heard about it over 20 years ago, that we needed to replace the correctional facility in Chittenden. So this is just following through on what many administrations have tried to push forward.
All right, we can take one more question and then have to follow up with anyone after.
I guess just lastly, Governor, as I know you know, the House passed version of the BAA includes money to extend the cold weather protections in the GA program through June. I know you don't agree with that idea, but is it, to what extent, I guess, is it a line in the sand? Like, would you veto the BAA if it came to your desk with that provision in there in the Senate?
Again, I'm going to be careful not to use the V word at this point in time, but suffice to say, I wasn't in agreement with what came out of the House, and for a number of reasons, not just that program in particular, although that's I think moving in the wrong direction. But there's also more money being spent there. It was $14 million that was part of what we had paid proposing to reimburse the treasurer with. We have to answer the question, where's that money going to come from eventually? Because we're just borrowing it once again. And a lot of these issues, I just want to get to a place where historically we've used the BAA as a way to true up our financial issues. And no policy, just truing things up. And I think that we should get back to that, and that's why we kept the bill clean as presented. And now policy is being interjected there, and we're spending more than we should. Because we don't know what's going to happen over the next few months. There's a lot of rhetoric out of DC, and a lot of unknowns as to what that can mean to us financially. So I think we should not paint ourselves in a corner here and spend more money than we have until we know what the results are of a lot of things that are out of our hands. We should make sure that we have a flexibility with the money before we spend it, and that should be in the big bill. Thank you all.
Thank you.